Night shift at Camp Borealis hums inside the DFAC. Aluminum trays clack down the line. Steam slides along red lens light. And condensation freckles the seams. Specialist Nora Quinn. A 92 golf cook. Moves with clipped efficiency. Apron over a hoodie. Eyes tracking exits. Flow. And who blocks who? Corporal Eli Brooks tosses a ladle joke toward the tray line, while Private J. Voss smirks. But Sergeant First Class Matt Riker watches her footing and the way she never leans on a wall. Outside, Specialist Tasha Reed rides the generator swap. A low hum like a held breath. Exhaust pluming into cold. The wind shoves the canvas, and the DFAC answers like a chest that cannot quite exhale. A prickle gathers across shoulders. For a second, Nora rushes a pan. Then she resets. A strong start is quiet. It trains us to suspect what she already senses. Brooks needles Nora about never leaving the DFAC while Voss smirks. But Riker watches her balance. The way heel and toe settle without waste. And how the rifle rack stays in her peripheral like a street sign. The generator hum slips under the skin as Tasha Reed manages a swap outside. And the tent rides the wind against Hesco like fabric learning to brace. Nora touches a flat steel charm beneath her shirt. A simple disc with an edge polished by habit. Then lets it fall and keeps serving. Staff Sergeant Alana Pierce takes a thermos from her and notices the stillness that never feels frozen. On base net, Lieutenant Cade Morales updates tower rotations and simply mentions off-post-aggressor activity most ignore. The room begins to read her, quiet as intent rather than absence. The charm sets her breathing like a metronome. Quiet is not emptiness. It is proof a person does not need noise to be real. For a heartbeat, she almost snaps at Brooks. Then she swallows it and reloads the line with potatoes. Something like a dull roll walks the frozen flats beyond Camp Borealis, and everyone hears it. The kind of sound people pretend is ice settling. Inside the DFAC, red lens light claims the corners, while Specialist Tasha Reed says the generator is between loads and slips back through the flap. Breath streaking white. Trays keep their clack. Spoons nick metal. The radio on base net turns grainy, as if the cold chews it. Private J. Voss lingers near the internal sling rack by the door. Fingers clumsy in gloves. Trying to decide if moving helps or makes him too visible. His glove slides once and he yanks it tight. Specialist Nora Quinn. A 92, golf. Studies the aisle made by salt crates and wall. Maps a blind run. Files, angles, where memory can reach them later. She almost calls for someone to clear space. Then shakes her head and keeps the line moving. The tent snaps under wind and the Hesco hum answers. The room stops drifting and begins to take shape. Real suspense is spatial. Protection by refusal. Power hiccups. Then dies inside the Camp Borealis DFAC. And a tight string of controlled bursts snaps from beyond the Hesco, while red emergency strips glow like coals. Lieutenant Cade Morales calls condition red on base net, and the towers confirm sectors in clipped replies as illumination pops from Tower 2 and the flare paints the cold like daylight for a breath. Corporal Eli Brooks starts a laugh that goes nowhere. Private J. Voss stiffens at the entrance, his hands undecided. And Sergeant First Class Matt Riker ends the chatter with a tone that sets security and puts bodies against cover without theater. The room hears a job being given shape. Nora Quinn does not rush the door. She sets Voss with a low word and a steadier breath, then lets his shoulders drop into something useful. She clocks the blind run by the salt crates, the way it feeds a slice of emptiness toward the wall. And she helps Riker park 2 soldiers where angles matter. He does not ask how she knew. He points. She nods. The DFAC becomes a diagram instead of a cafeteria. Out by the generators, Specialist Tasha Reed pulls her hood tighter and times the swap so the grid does not trip hard again. A slip of cold air finds her wrists and burns. Inside, Staff Sergeant Alana Pierce stages behind a steel column with her bag unzipped and her eyes calm on the entrance. A tray tips and clatters. Someone mutters and then quiets. The flare outside bleaches the tent. Breaths turn white. And the blind run stands out in harsh contrast that even the nervous can read. Voss tries to stand still without shaking. For a second he grips too high and then fixes it. Brooks rolls his shoulders once and chooses to watch his sector instead of the room. Riker's hand carves lanes through the air, and Nora's chin answers with a small yes that needs no volume. The soundscape settles into measured noise. The fear is real. But order arrives first. You do not need a title to reset a room. Sometimes a measured breath is enough for everyone to find theirs. Aisles and crates turn into a steady drum. A map the hands can play in time. And the DFAC itself becomes the instrument that keeps the line from breaking. Outside, the flare fades and cold retakes the yard. But inside the layout holds. Calm riding, breath to breath, as trays steady and shoulders square. Another blast finds the wall and shakes grit through the DFAC entrance. Pebbles of frozen dirt skittering across the hardstand floor as bodies stumble and recover in a clatter of trays. Private J. Voss loses control of a rifle at his boots. Flinches. Then catches a breath as Specialist Nora Quinn scoops it up by habit and hands it back, pointing his eyes toward the crate lane and the doorway instead of his panic. Lieutenant Cade Morales holds the net steady. His voice, even on the base channel. Quick reaction force is moving. Maintain sectors. No chasing shadows. Towers keep illumination disciplined. Sergeant First Class Matt Riker knifes his palm through the air. Sets 2 soldiers behind the salt crate stack to own the blind run. And when he turns, he finds Nora already there. Weight set. Apron tugged over the lip of her plate carrier like a stubborn flag. She has no time to fix. It snags once. She yanks it free and keeps her angle. Staff Sergeant Alana Pierce posts behind a steel column with her medbag open and supplies laid in rows that make sense in low light. Specialist Tasha Reed keeps the generator timing clean so the DFAC does not stumble into darkness again. Her cheeks raw. Her shoulders squared against gusts that search for seams. Hands brush grit off the tray line. Boots find narrow stances. The tent stops feeling like a cafeteria and starts acting like a tool. Fear is present, but it moves to the edges while order takes the center. A quiet gravity nobody asks to name. Skill is its own dialect. The people who speak it do not need to announce themselves. The room learns the vocabulary one placement at a time. And it holds. Breathe steady for now. Probing bursts brush the north wall, and Tower 1 answers with disciplined lines from a mounted gun. The sound flat against frozen air while the DFAC holds its posture. Specialist Nora Quinn anchors the doorway, letting movement resolve before she commits. Breath steady enough that her sight stays honest. Corporal Eli Brooks watches control instead of volume and finds his shoulders dropping to match it. Private J. Voss copies what he can, checks his stance, then checks it again when a glove seam bites and slips. A soldier staggers inside trailing snow and pain. Staff Sergeant Alana Pierce plants behind hard cover and does exactly what keeps him here. Tourniquet high and tight. Time marked with a quick scrawl. Voice low enough to move him from panic to possible. Sergeant First Class Matt Riker keeps his eyes on the lanes. Not the crowd. He asks the only question he needs. Can Nora own this doorway? She nods once, and the sector becomes a promise the room can lean on. Cold turns every exhale into a metronome. Nora follows that count, and the DFAC follows her. For a second, she almost overreaches the angle. Then she eases back and resets. Brooks notices his hands have stopped shaking. Voss finds a rhythm that does not embarrass him. We do not need backstory during contact. What we need is skill that spreads from one set of hands to the next. Now, Lieutenant Cade Morales keeps the bass net steady. Voice, even as a metronome, while quick reaction force sets on the edge of the runway lanes, and nobody overextends. Eyes stay on the short strip and the wind that keeps scraping across it. On AirNet, a new tone checks in. Chief Warrant Officer 2 Derek Hall, finishing a training sortie in an A-10C. Fuel on the backside, and rules of engagement tight enough to be felt through the radio. He can orbit and watch. Nothing else. Which lands like cold on the back of the neck and reminds everyone that help does not always arrive with noise. Sergeant First Class Matt Riker slides beside Specialist Nora Quinn. He reads the comm he has met before in other rooms with worse lighting and trusts her placement without asking for origin stories. Tower 2 calls movement along the slice she marked earlier. A confirmation that moves Riker from caution to quiet belief. Corporal Eli Brooks swallows pride that tastes like pennies and starts coaching Private J. Voss to mirror Nora's steadiness. Elbows lower. Eyes on sectors. And a breath that he almost rushes before he catches it. Staff Sergeant Alana Pierce handles another casualty behind hard cover. Anne's efficient while she keeps a voice that pulls someone back from the edge. Specialist Tasha Reed times the generator transition, so power returns in a rise that does not kill the illumination rhythm outside. When the lights surge back, the room looks smaller, but nobody reaches for size they have not earned. The rules of engagement feel like an invisible character in the scene. Unblinking. Forcing patience when adrenaline wants volume. Ground holds because ground decides to hold. The best air cover can be a room that refuses to break. Riker's eyes flick from Nora to the tower call-out and back. Brooks and Voss listen more than speak. And the DFAC keeps running like a tool in patient hands. A glove seam scratches. Someone shifts and stops. And the night settles into a workable shape. Outside, the runway sits quiet. Inside, procedure thickens into habit. And shoulders remember where to rest between calls. Probing contact thins until the tower calls space themselves like breath. Wind takes back the soundscape around Camp Borealis, while Lieutenant Cade Morales holds the base net and directs a short QRF sweep. Everyone else maintain posture and let the angles stand. Staff Sergeant Alana Pierce presses a folded wipe into Nora's hand. Then turns back to the wounded, where heat from the DFAC fogs against the cold at the entrance. Grease and blood streak Nora Quinn's apron over her plate carrier. She scrubs once. Misses a stripe. Scrubs again. Then lets it be, because trays keep moving. Corporal Eli Brooks approaches with gratitude that trips over itself. Specialist Nora Quinn points him to a hot tray and adds water with a nudge of the wrist. Private J. Voss hovers. Steadier than an hour ago. And Sergeant First Class Matt Riker sends him to watch the crate angle, where patience is more useful than volume. On AirNet. Chief Warrant Officer 2 Derek Hall, in an A-10C, signs off for fuel and rules of engagement. The room absorbs the message. Ground is on its own and chooses to carry that weight. Specialist Tasha Reed stabilizes the generator cycle. When the hum settles into one reliable note, her hands shake for the first time, and she finally sits. A mitten catching on a buckle before she frees it. Brooks eats in silence. Relief, tasting, ordinary. Voss posts where he was told and does not fidget after the first minute. Pierce's hands move on autopilot that only comes from training. Eat while it is hot becomes a kind of absolution. A plain sentence that closes the night without speeches. Survival is rarely cinematic. The real win is having something left to clean. To restock. to heat up again. Nora checks the doorway, feels a doubt flicker, and lets it pass. Outside, the wind combs the Hesco. Inside, the DFAC remembers it is a tool and not a room. Someone writes a chair and leaves it there as a marker. Trays return to rhythm. Breathing evens out across the line. Not perfect, but close enough to count as peace. Hours after contact, the repairs bite into Hesco like careful stitches, and the wind returns to its old noises along the hard stand. Tracks from the quick reaction force harden into gray seams. A map pressed into frozen ground. Inside Camp Borealis, the DFAC smells like coffee and cleaner. Lieutenant Cade Morales files a blotter entry that reduces the night to a line of facts. No breach. 2 wounded, stable. It reads like a receipt for a cost nobody can total. Sergeant First Class Matt Riker pauses outside the entrance and chooses not to crowd Specialist Nora Quinn. He learns more by the way she breathes near doorways than he would from questions. So he lets the space be hers and moves on. Staff Sergeant Alana Pierce returns a clean thermos and credits Nora for keeping the room ahead of the curve. Nora waves it off. Pierce leaves 2 fresh tourniquets on the counter and walks back to the aid station without ceremony. Corporal Eli Brooks comes forward with a plain apology that does not try to redeem him. Nora asks if they are good and takes the yes like a contract. Private J. Voss shows up at breakfast with his sling right and almost says, "Mom," by mistake. He blushes and corrects himself, then holds the door for the next person and pretends that was the point. Specialist Tasha Reed climbs the short ladder to the breaker panel and tapes a handwritten tag across the switches. No swaps during tower illumination. Grease prints smudge the corners. It becomes a small memorial to a night that did not get worse. On the flight line, the Air National Guard detachment taxis for a daylight sortie. Chief Warrant Officer 2, Derek Hall, lifts 2 gloved fingers inside the canopy as he passes the DFAC window. Nora acknowledges with the smallest tilt of her chin and returns to stacking trays. She lets the moment remain what it is. Courtesy, not theater. Daily life resumes. Classes on cold weather lanes. Checks on heaters and tires. The DFAC coffee tastes different because everyone saw who kept the room steady. Respect settles into habit instead of legend. Knives shine by sunlight and look ordinary again. The right endings do not flare. They set, like concrete, into the routines that keep people whole. Institutional memory lives on a scrap of tape and a binder note, not in a speech or a medal. And that is how a place remembers without losing the day. Morning routines return in small pieces at Camp Borealis. Specialist Nora Quinn wipes a line heater until it stops streaking. Notices one spot she missed. Returns. Gets it right. Staff Sergeant Alana Pierce double-checks dates on gauze and tosses a roll that went soft from a bad seal. Sergeant First Class Matt Riker slows Private J. Voss with a hand on the whiteboard, tracing sectors for shelter in place and making him redraw at walking pace. Corporal Eli Brooks risks a joke about coffee that lands. Nobody flinches because the center holds. Lieutenant Cade Morales sits at metal table and updates the SOP binder. Illumination and generator swaps live together now. And the QRF page is clear. Hold. Do not hunt. He prints a copy, slides it into a sleeve, and writes the time as 2:30 p.m. The DFAC clock ticks. Steam climbs from cups on bench. The bass slides back into training rhythms that feel earned rather than assumed. Nora stacks trays and breathes easy, then feels a doubt and checks the doorway out of habit before returning to the line. Pierce passes, gives a nod that does not demand one back, and keeps moving. Brooks helps Voss lift a pan correctly and does not make it a performance. Policy reads like a love note to competence, recoding memory into procedures. Quiet wins because it frees people to spend their noise on the work that matters. Midday hush settles in the DFAC after the long night. Specialist Nora Quinn, a 92 golf cook at Camp Borealis, touches a flat steel charm with a finch-etched shallow, then tucks it back and returns to the tray line. Outside, wind combs the tundra along the Hesco. Inside, one tray clacks and dinner resumes. She feels an itch under the apron strap and adjusts at once. The room holds the lesson without speeches. Continuity becomes closure. Call it myth if you want. She calls it Tuesday.